Welcome to CBS Easy.
Ever stop to think how a country like India, it's so huge and diverse, how does it even work? Well, a big part of the answer is this one powerful idea, federalism. It's the blueprint, the very framework that holds it all together. And today, we're going to unpack it.
All right, so here's the game plan. We'll start with what federalism even is. Then we'll zoom in on India's story. We'll look at how it's actually practiced, check out this idea of decentralization, and wrap it all up with a super quick recap for your exams. Okay, so first things first. To really get what federalism is all about, let's just quickly remember what we talked about last time with power sharing. Remember that idea of a vertical division of power? Well, federalism is basically that concept in the real world. And a perfect example of this is the story of Belgium versus Sri Lanka, right? Belgium went federal. They gave their regions real constitutional power to handle their diversity. But Sri Lanka? They stuck with a unitary system where the national government basically called all the shots. And the results? Well, they couldn't be more different. Belgium found a way to live together peacefully, while Sri Lanka sadly faced a lot of conflict. So what is federalism exactly? Here's the textbook definition. It's a system of government where power is split between a central authority and all the different parts of the country, like states or provinces.
Okay, so what are the key ingredients? First, you've got two or more levels of government, a national one and state ones. Now, here's the key. Each level has its own jurisdiction. That's a fancy word for its own area of control. And this isn't just some pinky promise. It's written right into the Constitution, so one level can't just wake up and change the rules. The courts are there to play referee. And the whole point of the setup? It's a balancing act. It's about safeguarding national unity and accommodating all that rich regional diversity.
And check this out. You might think, oh, only 25 countries, but get this. Those 25 federal countries are home to 40% of everyone on the planet. That's huge. It really shows you that for most big, diverse countries, federalism is pretty much the only way to go. All right, pens out, highlighters ready. This is a classic exam question, for sure. There are basically two ways a federation can come into being. First, you have coming together federations. Think of the USA. You had independent states that decided, hey, let's team up to form a bigger country. Here, the states are super powerful. Then you have holding together federations. This is when a big country, like India, decides to divide its power between the national government and the states to manage everything better. In this model, the central government tends to hang on to a bit more power. Okay, so let's zoom in on India, a perfect example of a holding together federation. How does its constitution set up this whole federal structure? Now, here's a little bit of trivia for you. If you actually read the Indian Constitution, you won't find the word federation anywhere. It calls India a union of states. But don't let that fool you. Even though the word isn't there, the entire system is built on all those principles of federalism we just talked about. So how is the power actually divided? Well, the Constitution has this brilliant three-list system. You've got the Union List. This is the national government's to-do list with stuff like defense, banking, all the big picture things. Then there's the State List. This is for the states with things like police, trade, and agriculture. And finally, you have the Concurrent List. Think of this as a shared to-do list for things like education and marriage, where both the center and the states can make laws. Okay, so having a great constitution is one thing, but how has this all worked out in the real world? Let's look at how federalism in India has really been tested over the years. The first huge test? Creating states based on language. Right after 1947, leaders had to redraw the internal map of India. The plan was to group people who spoke the same language into the same state. Now, at the time, a lot of people were terrified this would tear the country apart. But you know what happened? The exact opposite. It actually made the country stronger and more united because it respected people's identities. Next up, language policy. This is super important. India does not have a national language. Yes, Hindi is an official language, but so is English, and crucially, the Constitution recognizes 22 other scheduled languages. This careful, flexible approach showed a real respect for diversity and helped India avoid the kind of terrible conflicts over language that we saw in places like Sri Lanka. And the third big test has been the relationship between the central government and the states. You can really see a before and after picture here. Before 1990, you often had one party running everything, both at the center and in many states. This sometimes meant the central government could just push the states around.
But after 1990, things changed. Regional parties became much more powerful, and that kicked off the era of coalition governments. So, what's a coalition government? It's basically when two or more parties have to team up to form a government, and this was a game changer for federalism. Suddenly, the national parties had to respect these regional parties. They couldn't just ignore them. This led to a whole new culture of sharing power and respecting the autonomy of the states. All right, that brings us to our final big topic, decentralization in India. The basic idea was, hey, for a country this massive, maybe 2 levels of government just isn't enough. We need to take it local.
So what do we mean by decentralization? It's exactly what it sounds like. It's when power is taken from the central and state governments and given to local government. The thinking behind it is pretty straightforward. Local problems are best solved by local people.
And a really major step in this direction happened back in 1992. A constitutional amendment was passed that completely changed the game. It made regular elections for local governments mandatory. It reserved seats for SCs, STs, and OBCs. It reserved at least a third of the spots for women. And it forced state governments to share power and money with these new local bodies. A huge, huge step.
So this third tier looks a little different depending on where you are. Out in the countryside, it's known as Panchayati Raj. And in towns and big cities, you have municipalities and municipal corporations. It's really democracy in action, right at the local level.
Okay, that was a lot. So let's do a quick-fire 60-second recap of the absolute key things you need to know for your exams.
First up, federalism is just a system that divides power between a central authority and other units, like states. Number 2, remember that India is a holding together kind of federation. That means the center is generally a bit stronger than the states. Third thing, that power is split up using those 3 lists, union, state, and concurrent. Super important to remember that. And finally, decentralization gave us that third tier of government, panchayats and municipalities, the real local level. So when you think about it, this whole balance of power between the center and the states, it's not just some abstract idea in a textbook, right? It affects your daily life, big time. So here's a final thought to chew on. How does this federal structure, this constant balancing act, actually show up in your community, in your life?
Thank you for watching with us. See you next time.